Hi, I'm Nick Moran. I oversee audience development at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Today, I will show you how my team adapts public health messages into content for social media and how you can use similar approaches to share key messages with your own communities. This lecture is not a design tutorial, writing workshop, or an overview of on-platform best practices for specific social networks. Rather, our focus today is on the overarching why and how of our social media content strategy. Most of my examples are from Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but the strategies we use are broadly applicable to TikTok, YouTube, and other social networks. And they can be adapted for big teams as well as small teams and even individual social media users. Let's clearly define what we're doing. At the Bloomberg School, we broadly summarize our social media content strategy like this. We use social media to share key public health messages. Each piece of our social media content ladders up to or reinforces those key messages. More on all of this as we proceed. Much of our content translates the science for people who are not experts. What is R naught, and why does it matter? What does airborne really mean? Things like that. We draw inspiration and ideas for content from frequently asked questions we encounter in our everyday lives. What do our neighbors ask us when we get the mail, for instance? And we also take cues from the comments we get on social media, such as when someone asks us to explain a new study being covered in the media and what it means for their everyday lives. Always, we strive for our content to be news you can use for ordinary people and public health practitioners alike. I say public health practitioners because some of our best performing content is designed to serve as a resource for conversation. Examples in this category include guides for how to talk to your friends and family about the importance of getting vaccinated. In that case, the person seeing the social media content has already been vaccinated and is already friendly and receptive to our message. And so we are equipping them with resources to use in their personal lives instead of trying to affect behavior change in that person themselves. And as you can imagine, some of our efforts also involve debunking misinformation that is already circulating or pre-bunking what we know could be misunderstood in the future. We just discussed our messaging strategy, but what about our goals on social media? There we have two goals. First, we want to create content that informs, entertains, and motivates people to share it. To make big impacts on social media, it's not enough to talk to your own followers. You need to reach beyond into communities that may not even know about you. The three parts of this goal, inform, entertain, and get them to share, are related, and that's important to keep in mind. In fact, they can be achieved with a single post, such as the one on the right about strategies to cope with a fear of needles. One of our followers may see this image on Instagram and use the guidance in their own life. Another person might just adore the cute animals and share it with their cousin. And a third might think, hey, my partner hates needles. This is useful, and direct message it to them through Instagram Messenger. In the first scenario, we got in front of one person and helped them, which is great. But in the other two scenarios, we reached at least 4 people, and likely many more. We make big and small decisions throughout the content planning and creation process that allow us to achieve the 3 parts of this goal. More on that as we continue. We do this because when you consistently inform and entertain your followers, and when they share your content with their followers, your audience will grow. Over time, your audience will feel more like a community. You will have regulars who consistently engage with your content, and superfans who share your content all the time. In the context of public health, these people become evangelists not just for your brand, but for the guidance you are sharing, and therefore public health guidance. On the right, there's an example of a user sharing one of our Instagram posts, a meme we made based on the musician Drake's album cover, which we use to publicize the safety of COVID-19 vaccines for people who are pregnant. It's often said that a trusted messenger makes all the difference in a public health campaign. I trust my brother more than I trust a stranger. It's always important that your audience finds you trustworthy, but on social media, it's just as important to design content that your followers can share with people who trust them. Big picture, how do we know it works? The numbers are encouraging. My team manages 5 English language social media accounts for the Bloomberg School. We maintain 1 Chinese language account on WeChat. All told, we have an audience of more than 1 million followers. In a typical week, we publish 65 posts and reach between 5 and 7 million users. That means that on any given week, for every one of our followers we reach, we also reach at least 4 million who don't follow us yet. That's why our audience grows by 0.5% each week. Week in and week out, people see our content because their friends shared it, and they decide to follow us too. Those numbers are really the ones you need to focus on because they are applicable to small organizations as well as large ones. Even if you can only post once or twice per week, and even if your overall audience is modest in size, you can still aim to create content that encourages your followers to share it with others. And if you focus on shareability, then over time, your audience will grow. There are 4 keys to creating good content, and I'll go over them here. But it's important to think through these 4 keys before you actually try to create any content. The process begins with defining your message. A message is something that your content will reinforce. An example message could be, COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. A message is best when it's short and direct. It's not your message's job to convince people. It's your job to make content that reinforces the message. One easy way to do that is by treating each piece of content like supporting evidence for your message. By simply making a list of 3 points that reinforce COVID-19 vaccines being safe and effective, we've arrived at 3 ideas for content, as you see on the right. Let's make one post about how we know vaccines prevent severe disease. And let's make another post about how Operation Warp Speed did not skip necessary safety trials. And let's make another post about how getting COVID-19 is more dangerous than getting vaccinated. Either explicitly or implicitly, all 3 of those posts convey the message, COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. We can go further. They say in marketing that a person needs to see something multiple times before they engage with it. That's especially true on social media. You might have to share a message on 3 separate days because some people weren't online for 2 of them. You might also have to share different versions of the same content depending on who you're trying to reach. If you want to convey to a community that COVID-19 can be more dangerous than the vaccine, you should tailor that message to each group within the community. There might be one piece of content for elders in the community who are at higher risk themselves. There might be another piece of content for young people in the community who are at lower risk individually, but could put others at risk. Effective content is not one size fits all, even if it ladders up to a universal message. The next part of the content creation process involves identifying your audience. Social media is interesting because we're talking about audiences within audiences. What I mean is that when you're talking about your own Instagram audience, you first need to consider the fact that Instagram itself has an audience. In 2021, Pew found that 40% of US adults used Instagram, and 28% of US adults used LinkedIn. But what's hidden in those figures is the fact that Instagram's audience trends much younger than LinkedIn's, and there are additional demographic considerations as well. My first advice is to not get swept up in the raw numbers, but rather to think about who those numbers represent. Consider an example in geographic terms. Say you want to reach young people in the Mid-Atlantic region, and I gave you the option to post your content to an audience of 14 million people or an audience of 600,000 people. You might think, well, let's go for 14 million people. But here's the thing. By chasing scale alone, you didn't ask an important question. Who's in that audience? In this example, 14 million people is the population of Tokyo, Japan, while 600,000 people are residents of Baltimore City. Remember, your goal was to reach young people in the Mid-Atlantic region. Your goal was not to reach the highest number of people in terms of raw numbers, but rather to reach a specific group of people where they already were. If you want to reach people in the Mid-Atlantic, you'd choose Baltimore over Tokyo. If you speak English and not Japanese, you'd choose Baltimore over Tokyo. Similarly, if you want to reach young people, you'd choose Instagram over Facebook. If the content you want to post is an illustrated graphic, you want to post it on Instagram instead of YouTube. Back to the Pew chart on the right, more US adults use YouTube than LinkedIn, but maybe your audience is more likely to use LinkedIn. In other words, defining your audience is not just about chasing scale. It's about figuring out who you want to reach, what you have to offer them, and where you can meet them with it. This talk is mostly about organic social media content that you can post to your existing followers so they share it. But here's a quick note about paid promotion on social media. When you pay to promote your content on social media, you can target specific groups of people, either by interests, demographics, or even geography. And in this way, you can make it easier, albeit with a cost, to reach exactly who you want to reach. This can be a worthwhile strategy, especially when the audience you're trying to reach is very specific. Now I'll throw another consideration at you. Once you know the message you want to send, and you know where you want to reach your audience, you need to consider, what formats do I need to produce? That really depends on where you're posting. If you're trying to reach an audience on TikTok and YouTube, you need to make video content, and a lot of it. If you're trying to reach an audience on Twitter or LinkedIn, you can use more text-heavy approaches. If you're going after audiences on Instagram or Pinterest, you need to focus on engaging visuals. So you have a message, you know where your audience is, and you've made something right for their platform. Now you need to make sure your content reaches the right people. For that, you need to consider the fourth dimension, time. If your audience is using Facebook, and mostly located on the Eastern Seaboard, for instance, you might want to publish your content during the periods of peak activity, 9 to 12 p.m. on a weekday, or 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. on a weekday, in our case on the right. You can see these insights yourself by looking through your own Facebook page's analytics. Let's preview a couple concepts and tips that will help you create good content. We'll start with workflow. A lot of our social media content begins in a Google Doc, where we write scripts. We use a template like the one on the right, where a social media producer or a writer on our team enters the basic information or storyboard they want to cover in a social post. Once the script is set, we send it to a subject matter expert, usually a faculty member, for technical review. When doing this, it's helpful to give reviewers a clear deadline on when you need their feedback. After we have the expert's feedback, we proceed to layout, which you can see on the right of this screen. When we design our content, we like to design every format at the same time. Square images for Instagram feed post or for use on Facebook, vertical images for Instagram stories, and maybe horizontal versions we can use in a newsletter or on our website. Doing all of this at once is about efficiency. The reason we get the scripts locked down before we lay out graphics is because we want our subject matter experts to focus on technical review. We don't necessarily want them to influence our creative decisions. Our general practice is to get the science vetted first, and then our team is in charge of presenting that science in an engaging way. The scientists are experts in their fields. We are experts in ours. Speaking of, there are a couple techniques you can use to make your content more engaging. The first is called the curiosity gap, which is a concept that leverages an audience member's curiosity about a subject to get them more interested in your content. On the right side of the screen, you'll see that the first slide of this Instagram post presents a subject, a news story about a pause in the administration of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine. And the post promises that there's more information in subsequent slides that an audience member should know about. This seems so basic when you spell it out this way, but the tactic motivates people to stop scrolling and click into the next slide to see what they need to know. In other words, the curiosity gap is about sparking someone's interest by promising information, but not delivering that information right away. With illustrated content, such as the example from another post on the right, you should also think about how small details in the illustration can make your content more interesting. The top half of this graphic is about the CDC's guidance on domestic travel, and it would not be particularly interesting to people ordinarily. But the fact that we added a face covering to the airplane is unexpected, and that sort of unexpected detail can catch someone's attention. You might think about design choices as examples of micro decisions, or a small decision you make as you're creating your content. Here's a secret. You can't plan every part of a piece of content in advance. You will need to make dozens of micro decisions while you're making the content. Some of these decisions are so small that you scarcely realize you are making them, such as the decision to use one word or another. Some of these decisions feel much bigger, such as what tone you're trying to strike with your content. Is it something very serious, or is it something that can be playful? In the next slides, I'll show you how this works. Here, we have 3 examples of Instagram posts published by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. The example on the left, "How can I talk to my friends and family about getting vaccinated?" is a straight-laced, informative post. The content of the post itself is quite serious, but we designed it in the same bright, eye-catching colors that we use in all of our content so that it would be identifiable as part of our brand, or the way our content typically looks. In the center is a post we made about accessing COVID-19 services free of charge. This would ordinarily be a pretty dry message, so to compensate for that and make it more engaging, we illustrated the piece in a more playful way, based on the board game Monopoly. The substance of the content is just as straight-laced as what's in the "How can I talk to my friends and family" piece on the left, but because we gave the content a more playful look, the message might interest more people than a more traditional piece would. Then on the right, we have an example of a piece that conveys a serious message, get your flu shot, but does so with a very playful design and with very playful content, such as parodied song lyrics. You'll notice that all 3 designs use colors from our brand palette and fonts from our brand guidelines, so they all are recognizably part of our brand. At the same time, the substance of each post, the micro decisions we made about each one, give each piece of content a different tone, which serves 2 purposes. 1, it helps engage different audiences. And 2, it allows otherwise repetitive or familiar messages, such as get the flu shot, to earn attention from people who would otherwise tune them out. It's one thing for my school to tell me to get a flu shot this winter. It's another thing for my school to quote a rapper while doing so. The same approach, weighing seriousness of the content with the seriousness of its presentation, can be applied to video as well as static images, such as in these 3 examples ordered from most serious and traditional, on the left, into content that's more and more approachable and playful, on the right. The point is that it's worth trying multiple approaches, but that all of your efforts should be recognizably yours. That's where branding comes in. There are features unique to video that can affect your content's tone. Consider pacing. Fast, flashy videos usually have a different vibe than slower-paced, subdued videos. Consider audio. Loud music conveys something different from soft music. Consider animation versus real humans, or green screen versus seated interview versus real-life settings. When you decide to make a video, you also need to make each of these micro decisions so that the finished product strikes the tone that's right for you. In the video on the left about the US drug overdose crisis, we used a muted version of our brand color palette, and we paced the video slower than some of our others. Moving to the center of the screen, we have a video with one of our faculty members answering FAQs about the importance of flu shots. This video's core message, get vaccinated, is one that could benefit from a novel approach to get people interested. Our approach was to lead with a question, not just yes or no as you see in the video's title screen, but also by opening the video with one of our interviewers looking straight at the camera and asking, "Can I really be hospitalized from the flu?" which is a question we knew would pique people's interest. From there, the video proceeds with rapid cuts between interviewer and expert and addresses questions in a short, direct way. The fast pace, coupled with provocative questions and a head-on camera shot, hold an audience member's attention more than a slower-paced, text-heavy animation of this content would. Of course, there are also times when even more playfulness is warranted, such as in the example on the right. In this video, which was a live-action skit about how to wear masks properly that we produced for Instagram, we used the same tactics as before. Fast pace, quick cuts between speakers, and short, snappy dialogue. But we added some additional flourishes to the mix as well, all to make the end product come off funnier. There are costumes, as you can see in the still shown here on the right, and no comment on who's in that clown costume. But there are also silly sound effects, voice gags, and more. In this case, we knew that our core message, you need to wear a mask properly for it to be effective, was one that we wanted to share first and foremost with students. To reach students, we wanted to produce something for Instagram Reels because students are more likely to see content in that format than on, say, Twitter. And because we knew we were going to amp up the silliness and also produce the content for a built-in video tool within Instagram, we were okay with departing from our typical branding, our fonts and colors, so that instead we could use the in-app features itself. That divergence from our typical branding is subtle, but it's something that is striking to people familiar with our work. And that momentary thought of, wait, is Johns Hopkins really posting this? Can be enough to get people to stop scrolling and check out the video. The takeaway here is that silliness can be achieved, but in both video and in static images, it's most effective when you deploy it judiciously. If we posted all clown videos all the time, people would tune them out. But when we typically post a mix of serious and informative content, and then more playful but informative content, an occasionally truly silly piece of content will stand out. Here's what we think success looks like and how we achieved it. When you strike the right balance between substance and design, the results can be powerful. Let's talk about what success looks like. In April 2021, when administration of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine was paused so that health officials could investigate a rare but concerning signal with blood clots, we very quickly put together a series for Instagram and Facebook explaining what the pause was all about and reassuring people that the pause was evidence that the system was working to keep them safe. A concerning signal was being investigated, and here's what people who had already been vaccinated should know. We were able to move quickly because we had a well-established workflow. As we discussed before, set the script, review it with an expert who knows our deadline, and lay out all of the image formats at the same time. The benefits of this established workflow is that we were very, very quick out of the gate. Over a 1-week span in April, the post that we created reached 60 million users on Facebook and earned scores of engagements, comments, and shares. And that success can be attributed to the fact that we published the post just as the story was hitting the news. We were an official source sharing news you can use with the concerned public, and we were explaining that news in an approachable, direct way that anyone could understand. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, so we took it as a compliment when the next day a certain government health authority posted about the pause. The most important takeaway from this lecture is this. You need to know your messages before you create content to support them. Also, you need to design your content so that people want to engage with it and hopefully share it. Informing your existing audience is useful, but motivating them to share your content is better. This is social media's entire benefit, getting your message beyond your existing audience and getting your messages in front of new people. The truth is people trust other people more than they trust most institutions. So if you create something that people want to share, you can turn your fans into ambassadors. These ambassadors, or trusted messengers, will help you boost trust. People are more receptive to messages shared by people they know than they are to messages that are like cold calls. You'll reach persuadable people through these intermediaries, and people will be more receptive to your messages if their contacts endorse them first. And frankly, there are algorithmic benefits to this strategy. Every social network rewards publishers of highly shared posts by showing more of their posts to more people, or by recommending their posts to people. Think of the people who liked this also liked feature you have seen all around you. That sort of behavior is what makes content spread in the first place. There you have it, the how and why of what the Bloomberg School does on social media. I hope you can adapt these lessons for content you want to create so that you can reach people you want to reach. Thank you and happy creating.